So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's exciting webinar, Powering Up Recovery, Greater Manchester. My name is Councillor Elise Wilson, and I am the Economic and Business Lead for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and leader of Stockport Council. Before I go into anything further, I do want to let you all know that I am aiming this morning to finish a couple of minutes early, so that we are able to participate in the 1 minute silence at 12 o'clock. So time is on to get us through on time, something I'm not 100% successful at last time, so this time I will do better. So a very warm welcome to everybody who's joined us for this roundtable this morning, and what follows on from a series and an event last year. I'm really pleased that so many businesses and political leaders across Greater Manchester, as well as industry and economic experts, have joined us. And I know that it'll be a really engaging debate with political thinking on how Greater Manchester can lead the way to net zero and green recovery. And I particularly want to thank Electricity North West for bringing this event together and inviting me back a second time. So we have two excellent leaders panels, which are bringing together key voices from politics, business and the industry to look at the challenges and the opportunities ahead for Greater Manchester's green recovery. The key questions that we are seeking to address should be now showing on your screens, and they are: what are the challenges for business and political leaders on the road to a green recovery, and how do we make zero carbon a choice for business, consumer and communities? And as the net zero transition accelerates, what are the opportunities to reboot the economy and create green jobs and skills for Greater Manchester? And so before we move on to discussing that, a little bit of housekeeping. So those of you who are on social media and on Twitter, do please tweet about this and use the hashtag Powering Up Recovery GM and tag in Electricity North West and Devo Connect. There will be some live polling questions throughout the session, which we hope you'll get involved with and let us know your thoughts. And while the panelists are talking, please do use the chat function to share your opinions, your comments, and I will do my best to draw on those to kind of get some discussion going on all of that. And panelists, usual rules apply. Please mute your microphones so that there's no interference with others talking, and remember to unmute them when we want you to speak, because despite us having done this nearly a year now, we're still doing that. You're still on mute on numerous meetings. And so I'd like to, first of all, welcome and introduce Paul Bircham, Regulation and Communications Director of Electricity North West, to give us our opening address. Paul.
Thanks, Elise. It's great to have you back chairing our Powering Up series again. So thank you for coming back and doing another one with us. A really interesting day to be holding this event. That, you know, COVID has dominated the news over the past year, and it's dominating the news again today, quite rightly, as we sort of look back and remember, and you know, pay tribute to a lot of people who have lost their lives, or who have had their lives dramatically affected by the pandemic and by the lockdowns that have resulted from it. So that's been a devastating challenge to the country and to the economy, and it comes hand in hand with climate change, which is another potentially devastating challenge. And it's clear that really our economic response to the impact of COVID must also address some of these challenges, must address the climate challenge and environmental issues, and that they are a route to find some benefit for our economy and for our society as we seek to recover. So this is a critical time for our region and for us, Electricity North West is critical time for our power network that supports the northwest of England. And partly the reason for that is that this is the year in which we're formulating a business plan that will set out what we will and can do up to 2028. And so we're really keen to stimulate all of this debate and to hear input into what we need to do in the future. We want to hear what's important to all of you participating in this panel discussion today, and all those in the audience who are responding as well, and why that is, how fast we should be moving to power up a recovery for Greater Manchester, what are the challenges and opportunities that Greater Manchester faces in that recovery, and what do you think Electricity North West's role should be in that recovery? Is it the provision of the infrastructure that's required, or how far should we go beyond that basic role in supporting our communities across the northwest of England, and in particular in Greater Manchester? Ofgem are pretty clear that customers are also clear that from research and engagement we've done in the last 2 years, protecting those in vulnerable circumstances is really key. And there's probably never been a time when more people have found themselves very suddenly put into vulnerable circumstances. So we have to balance up these enormous environmental challenges that are going to really affect the energy infrastructure and the energy economy with responsibilities to the most vulnerable in our societies and how we support those. And that will be both through keeping bills down and costs as low as possible, but also providing additional support where it's appropriate for us to step in and help out. And then we're really keen on understanding what business views are on this, because businesses provide 2/3 of our revenue in total. And so it's businesses who are paying for everything that we're asked to do. So what are your views on what we should be spending all the bill payers' money on? How do we get the right balance between service and cost, taking on board the views from all of our customers, from domestic consumers right up to major energy users, as well as taking on board views from our political stakeholders. So today is a really important day for us to drill down into some of those challenges and those opportunities ahead, to set out where we think we might be going as we seek to recover, and to understand for us what that's going to look like, so that we can determine how we support that as best as possible as Electricity North West, and power up a recovery through clean growth, through new jobs, through new skills in Greater Manchester. So thanks very much for the opportunity, and I'll hand back to Elise.
Thanks, Paul. We're currently still on time, and I'd like to introduce our first excellent panel for this morning's discussion, that are looking at the challenges of powering up Greater Manchester. And so I'd like to introduce Caroline Farquhar, Senior Policy Researcher at Citizens Advice, Mo Hanslod, CEO of Bri-Tek Technologies, Chris Manka, Regional Chairman FSB, and Vic Walsh, Regional Organiser for Unison North West. Welcome this morning, and thank you so much for being part of our opening first panel. And so I have a question for you all to kick us off with, and hopefully we'll go around in turn, and maybe you can we can hear your thoughts on this question. And then after we've done that, I'll open up to a discussion, and those of you who are watching, we're really interested in your thoughts and your questions, so please do use the chat function, and we can put some questions to our panelists. So key question, first question, what are the challenges for business and political leaders on the road to a green recovery, and how do we make zero carbon a choice for business, consumer and communities? So Caroline, I'll come to you first.
Hi, I'm Caroline Farquhar from Citizens Advice, and we are the statutory consumer voice for energy, so we represent consumers' views. We've got quite an independent viewpoint because we're not industry, we're not the regulator, so we have a different viewpoint. So the question asks about challenges. So I'm only going to cover a couple of points. There's a lot out there, but I'm only going to cover a couple given the time. So I'm going to cover COVID impact and also the challenges people face in knowing what they need to do to reach net zero. So in the last year, Citizens Advice has done a lot of research on COVID impacts for people, how it's affected them. And one of the key elements of this has been the heavy debt levels that have come through. So a survey found that there was 1.6 billion in lockdown arrears, of which about 1 billion of that was rent arrears and 300 million or so was council tax arrears. So those are figures from a few months ago. I'm sure they'll be doing another repeat job in due course, but that position is likely to become even worse. So we've also got very high current unemployment rates. It's 5.1% for the country at the moment, the highest for 5 years. But that's actually going to be masking the true figure because a lot of people are on furlough. So government estimates for the end of the year are 6.5% or 2.2 million people unemployed. Now that's not only going to affect people's ongoing ability to live daily lives and pay for normal daily living, it's actually going to affect their ability to be able to invest in their homes for net zero, and also for things like electric vehicles, making that switch because they can be quite expensive. The other point I'm going to make is on knowledge and support for net zero. So Citizens Advice put out a report called Zero Sum earlier in the last year. And that found that most people were actually quite willing to make the changes that are coming, energy efficiency in their homes, switching to an EV, switching to low carbon heating. But what they didn't know is quite how to do it or where to get the best advice, etc. So how to make zero carbon a choice for people, especially given Greater Manchester's ambitious net zero target of 2038. So people and businesses of Greater Manchester are going to have to get knowledgeable fast to be able to make the changes they need to do. So a few pointers I've got down here. So I think one of the clear ones is clear need for national and local government policy, communications, and a clear timeline. There's going to be a need for support schemes for people to make the transition to buy these different things or invest in energy efficiency. And they're going to have to be there because some people will not otherwise be able to participate. Charities, community groups, very useful for independent advice, so they've got a part to play. And I would say ENW can also play its part in this. They already have support teams for businesses and community energy groups available, and I know that they're going to be boosting those up. They have knowledge and expertise that no one else will have, so that they will play their part too. And I just wanted to say, although we've raised challenges and costs, and opportunities is the next question, becoming knowledgeable is also about opportunities. So as markets develop in this arena, people will be able to sell on their spare capacity that they have available. They will be able to sell on their generation. They may have battery storage in their own homes from their EVs and be able to sell it back into the grid or to even each other. So there are opportunities out there. So become knowledgeable about all the cost elements, but also about the opportunities too. So I'll leave it there for now and pass on to the next person.
Thanks, Caroline. Mo, did you want to come in next?
Hi. Thanks. Thank you, Elise. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to come in from a business view. Okay, so my company is a eco-tech company. We supply LED lighting, far infrared heating, and other sexy eco technologies to the eco-tech sector. Here's my take on this. So we've been going for almost 10 years. The biggest challenge for businesses to adopt eco technologies is upfront cost. That's the biggest challenge. Now, Greater Manchester, along with a few other counties, they've got grants available for SMEs to help them change over and transition to eco technologies. But the challenge is again, the non-funded part is still quite sizable for a lot of companies. So what they do is they bulk cut it, they do it in stages, or they don't do it at all. So I've been thinking about this for a wee while, and one of the good things that have come out from COVID, if you can call it a good thing, is the civil and the bounce back interest-free loans. That's been very positive, very productive. It's helped a lot of businesses. So perhaps maybe taking that concept, what they could do is perhaps bring in a mixture, either or just focused on interest-free loans, where it's interest-free for a period of time. So maybe 12 months or 24 months. And then after that, if it's not paid back, then interest is applied. But what it will do is it'll certainly speed up and help companies that want to change over, allowing them to do so, because it's not affecting their cash flow. We supply LED lighting. The payback on that, the cost has come right down. You know, payback is typically less than 2 years. In some cases, it can even be 12 months. So, you know, a scheme like this would be really helpful to a lot of business, and it will. And by changing over to LED lighting, it reduces energy costs in a massive way. There's also heating technologies that are coming onto the market as well. One of our companies is focuses on far infrared heating technology, super efficient, easy to install, but again, cost is prohibitive, right? You know, if you've got an interest-free scheme, then companies will start thinking, you know what, we can do this, you know. So I think for me, that is one of the key solutions. The second thing is that, look, I like to see ourselves as an innovative company. We're quite an innovative company. And to keep people interested in eco-technology, it's right for innovation. So you technology. Last year we developed, or we were developing three innovations, and we're hoping to bring online in the next year or two. So the key is to support companies who've got this energy and ideas, and help them bring it to the market. So that's it. Those are my two simple suggestions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. I'll go to Chris and then Vic. So Chris.
Morning, Elise. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. From the point of view of the FSB, our membership really is, as you mentioned, Elise, everybody's very interested in green technology. Everybody's very interested in becoming more efficient. The trouble at the moment that we have, it can be summed up in one word, and that's debt. It's a combination of COVID and also amongst our customers, the impact of Brexit. And I think the further north you go, the greater the impact of Brexit that you find, because of the nature of company that we have up here. So whilst people are interested in green technologies, exactly as Mo suggested, it's the cost that is seen as being prohibitive, because words such as retrofit are bandied around, and it's a very sexy word. It sort of gets a lot of appeal, it gets a lot of airway, but frankly, if anyone's tried doing it, you'll realize that it's a very, very difficult process to go on to adapt an old style of property, whether it's a house or a workplace, to meet modern standards. It is very difficult. It's not impossible, but it just does cost a lot of money. The other aspect around that is the skills, finding the right skills and allowing those skills to flourish to an extent where more and more people are attracted into the sector, and we build up a level of expertise and a level of working. On the upside, I look at things such as the introduction of the ban on internal combustion engines by 2030. That's quite a radical piece of legislation. You've got 9 years left to use an internal combustion engine car as a manufacturer, to keep manufacturing them. So all of that infrastructure that was there to support building of engines and whatever, they've got a 9-year horizon now, and then it's gone. It was a really bold piece of work. It's been adopted. electric cars are becoming more and more adopted across the board. And I can't help thinking that the same or a similar kind of approach has got to be done around housing and planning, because I think housing emissions are the next biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after vehicles. And I know at the moment around Manchester there are apartments being built that are B or C rated, and they're brand new. And frankly, it's just not good enough. And I'd like to see a similar approach to planning, because we're putting infrastructure in place that's going to be around for 50, 100 years, maybe even more. And so it seems senseless to sort of let them off lightly now when we've got such aggressive targets to meet. So as to what can be done, we need to look at the issue of debt in the round, because debt's hanging over everybody's heads, particularly smaller businesses. Some have been able to access funding, others haven't. Some are going to suffer over the next couple of years. And really, the research that we found is that sadly the green issues are coming behind. How do we grapple with debt? How do we grapple with coming back to work? How do we grapple with rebuilding our markets, our traditional markets? And how do we deal with the issues posed to us by Brexit? So all of these they've been short-term shocks, but they've got a long tail to them, and it's how we actually integrate the opportunities around green technology into that long tail to make it a very viable and easily adopted solution. And I think what we'd be looking for from the likes of ELNW is some kind of setting of new standards that we can work to, that we can start developing skills against, becoming excellent in the arena, becoming the perceived number one authority, because all of these skills are going to be eminently exportable. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a big investment, but it's an investment that does have legs, and it does have a long lifetime as well. But I do think that we are capable of reacting to such massive changes. The motor industry has certainly shown that. Earlier on, the smoking ban shown that as well. It came into effect, and all of a sudden everything had changed. So I think there is an element of bravery that's required, but to be mindful that the audience that you're talking to, particularly amongst smaller business, is that they are very, very heavily weighed down with debt and other issues at the moment. If there's a way that we can find to help navigate a way through that ends up with a green solution, that would be the ideal. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. And Vic, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Elise. So I'm representing Unison today, but I'm also representing trade unions in general. And trade unions have been very much at the forefront of supporting the move to a more modern UK economy based on the principles of green jobs and carbon neutral industries for a long time now. So it's very encouraging to see engagement from policymakers, stakeholders, and the business community as well. I do believe that the green recovery can be every bit as big and important as other historic changes in the UK economy, and the Industrial Revolution and then post-industrial market reforms and the internet age. But this time we have a unique opportunity that we can plan and develop these changes. We can see them coming, so we can ensure that the growth is well balanced, that it's sustainable, and that it supports communities right across Greater Manchester, the North West, and the entire UK. There's no doubt for me that investment in the energy sector and the green economy can provide the much needed economic stimulus and job creation that we need post-COVID. But it's not just about investment in the technologies. We need to ensure that there's an investment in the people too. Now, the energy sector has a very highly skilled workforce already, and it has a lot of very specialised experience there. But it's also a workforce that is facing a huge demographic challenge. The age profile in energy is heavily weighted towards the 45 to 59 years bracket and higher. And within the next decade, many of these will be looking towards retirement. It's also not a diverse workforce. It's certainly not representative in terms of gender or BAME background. So it's very clear that we need to invest in training and skills development for the green recovery. And this would cover 3 areas. We already have existing workers who need fully funded access to quality training and skills development to support them through adaptations that they require and to be able to take up new opportunities. And I would say it's very disappointing that the government have chosen this time to close the Union Learning Fund, which has proven to be a good avenue to developing the skills of current workers. Outside of the energy industry, we also need to look to develop skills in other sectors of the UK economy. A good example of this is somewhere like the armed forces, to help those upskill and reskill to make it relevant to the green economy. But we also need to recruit through non-traditional energy routes, entry routes, so things like apprenticeship schemes, working with colleges and universities to develop courses and vocational career paths into the green economy. So we need to focus on that skills and development. But we also need to look towards sort of attracting a workforce that recruits from non-traditional backgrounds. And that will mean going into communities and actively recruiting a more diverse workforce. It ensures that it gives benefits to the workforce itself and the employer, but it also means that those communities are becoming involved in the development of the green economy. So thirdly, I think that what we need to look at is to achieve a skilled workforce is one that provides quality new jobs with good terms and conditions and decent pensions. Only with those quality jobs will you get a workforce that is invested in their employer, in the sector that they work in, but is also attracting people with the right skills. And it is an inclusive and diverse workforce. I think finally, just looking at this area, we need to also ensure that, you know, energy workers have the insight and skills to provide a unique viewpoint, not just on the challenges of climate change, but also the complexity and the solutions that are required to tackle it. So they can positively influence this area and the development of future policy in the green economy. So trade unions and workers should be given a seat at the table when key decisions are made, and they can contribute to the solutions. It means giving a voice to the workers and recognition of unions. So I think just to finish off, we have an opportunity to develop a long-term plan and a sustainable economic sector. And it's a great opportunity for cities and regions, including Greater Manchester and the North West, to design and fund and implement our own energy and transport solutions based on local skills, natural resources and local traditions. But they need to be integrated into long-term national plans. These plans need to be based on securing a long-term future for all, not just based on short-term profit or convenience. So energy policy needs to serve the public good, and workers need to be at the very heart of that. And so there, you know, some of the challenges that I think we face at the moment, focusing on one particular area, which is the workforce and the skills that they require. I think if I was to look at any sort of ask of ENW, I would say I know that I deal with the ENW, and I know that they engage in apprenticeship schemes. I know that they engage in upskilling and training their workforce, but it needs to be ramped up. It needs to be much more broadened out, and it needs to be more intensive. And I don't think that can just fall on the shoulders of ENW. I think that needs to be across the energy sector, across the green economy, and it needs to work in tandem with the government. Thank you.
Thanks, Vic. Thank you to you all for your contributions. Really interesting start, I think, and some quite rightly pointed out challenges that we do face. We've had some questions come in, which I'm going to put to you. Alan Quinn has asked around the quality of product. So obviously there's a need now for innovating, finding solutions to problems and to how we tackle some old buildings and the issues that we've raised, but actually how do we get these products, and how can we be sure that when businesses or consumers are purchasing products, they have the quality of product that meets their needs. And I think the skills and knowledge question, which has been raised a few times by various people, but I think, and I'm going to apologise up front now if I say your name wrong, but is it Tassos Kujionis from Associate Director from Curry & Brown, who really poses the question around not just the retrofit costs and having those solutions, but having the right skills for people and ensuring, I think, picking up on what Vic's saying, really, making sure that we have the people that we can do that, and how are we going to meet that need, I guess. So if I bring in maybe Mo first on some of those challenges around how can we be sure on the quality of product?
Okay, so the challenge you have, okay, as a business like myself, there's always going to be a challenge, and it's always going to be based on one thing, and it's always going to be based on price, right? Now, for a company like ourselves, we are certified by BSI. We hold 3 ISOs. We've been involved in phenomenal projects and worked with some great companies, anywhere from like EDF to V&A, etc. But at the end of the day, one of the great things about this country, it's a democracy. You have a right of choice, right? So you can have a great product, you can have a great offering, you can put whatever you can in place and say, look, I've got this, these are my certifications, these are the testimonials, etc. But it's down to the customer. Now, you can bring in certain legislation. The government at top level can turn around and say products have to be certified up to a certain standard, etc. But as we all know, there are always ways around it. Companies out there will sort of skirt borderline to get past these legislations. So I think we can do whatever we can. We can say to the government, look, make sure certain regulations are in place. But I think it's down to individual companies like ourselves to basically push out, and make sure that we are company and our products are the products of choice when it comes to projects. I think that's all we can do. But as I said, it will always come down to price. Unfortunately, that's reality.
Thank you. Caroline, do you think it's easy for people to be able to know what a quality product looks like and make that informed decision about what they're doing, whether that's a business or an individual for a private home? And so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
No, Citizens Advice has looked at this already. I mentioned a report called Zero Sum. I can pop it, you can look it up. If you just type Zero Sum as Citizens Advice, you can see the recommendations we had on there. Not only there's a need for consumer protections in this space. People have been burnt, and I can see there's someone who says they've got casework where someone was ripped off by cowboys and all the rest of it. So there is a need for active consumer protection in space. Things like redress schemes. What happens when somebody gets ripped off? What happens when someone goes out of business? What on earth can they do if they've got a worthless guarantee, etc.? So I think there is more to be done on the consumer protection front. So that's the regulatory side, governmental side. So while there's a part to play, as Mo was saying, on the production side, there's also a part to play in consumer protection side.
Thanks, Caroline. And to just move us slightly into the skills and knowledge, into the skills and knowledge kind of conversation. Chris, when we the government announced recently, didn't it, in the budget, the super deduction in a bid to kind of encourage businesses to make capital investment over the next year or two. But how does that translate to ensuring that we've got the people in our businesses with the right skills to do what we need to do, and about maybe a relationship with our learning establishments to kind of ensure that we have the right people with the right skills? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is, can we have some joined up thinking? Yes, it would be great. And it is what's necessary, actually. It is, I've been reading the chat comments as well, and also one from Alan Quinn about you know, how to get the right kind of specifications and you know, where that's done and how that's assessed and how it's done. Is there a possibility, you know, I mean, the Victorians built Victorian houses, which we all love and live in and what have you, and they're still around after 150 years and more. Why don't we have a new kind of design house? I think that's the kind of thing that Alan's alluded to as well. Why, I'm not suggesting that everything built the same, but why don't we start to introduce new standards? We have enormous amounts of housing, TV on the go at any time, turn the telly on at any time of the day, and you've got housing programs all over the place. And yet most of our housing stock isn't fit for this 2038 deadline. And so how do we actually go about redressing that? And you're right, there is an awful lot of skills. It's an appreciation of those skills. But where do you go to get A, qualified, and B, have a common set of standards that are universally acknowledged to be the Rolls-Royce of the sector, if you like? You know, who's going to put those standards down in the sand that we can all use as a marker? And I think that's the kind of thing that's needed. Amongst our membership, we've got tremendously talented small, medium-sized companies that are agile, that will take on new skills, that have got some great ideas. It's how we can allow the framework, the overall structure, to let those skills rise and to let other companies follow that kind of lead as well. That's the main thing. You know, we do need people to do this kind of work, but we need some very, very clear definitions. And there have been big mistakes. Grenfell Tower showed how big a mistake you can make with poor policing of standards. So there does need to be a shake-up. And I come back to the issue about cars. The government said, right, no more internal combustion engines in 9 years' time. Finished, done. And it's that level of commitment, it's that level of vision, and it's that level of idealism that we need to start promoting, because it is a long-term plan. It is a long-term view that's required. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to start getting those skills out into the mainstream. So it's going to need persistence.
Thanks, Chris. And Vic, I'll bring you in finally on this. So do you think there's a role for the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter in supporting maybe how employers can ensure that they're investing in the people that work for them, to make sure that they continue as a business to have the skills they need, and those that are working in those organisations are able to continue to see a future for themselves, maybe with that organisation, but maybe more long term in a sector that's I think a growing sector and a key part of our industrial strategy, and a key focus for us. Is if we're serious about 2038 target, then we've all got to be going in that direction.
I do, Elise. I mean, clearly having the charter in place means that you've got a standardised approach in terms of terms and conditions and expectations. It clearly will attract workers. It will clearly keep the workforce that we've got, so there's not a higher labour turnover. So I think it's a very good initiative, and I think it's something that can be certainly developed in this sector. And as well as attracting workers and keeping skilled workforce in place, it also means that it's giving those workers a voice, and means that their specialisms, their unique insight into the industry, can help develop it in the future and find those solutions. So I think the charter is very important. I would also say, just in terms of skills and training, I mean, the skills are there for our workforce. It's there. The big danger that we have is that we lose it. And what we need is, exactly as Chris said previously, that joined up thinking between businesses, between the government, and between the educational sectors. That's what we need to ensure that we don't lose those skills in the future, and they can be developed and expanded for the benefits of everyone.
Thanks, Vic. I am going to go rogue now all of a sudden, and I'm going to ask you all one quite quick question. And I realise that we're already at time, but I really think that this would be a really important question, so I really want you to answer it, but hopefully really quickly. So the question is, what is the most impactful action each organisation plans to take this year before the COP26 event in Glasgow in November to move themselves or others along the road to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2038? It's quite a specific question. So something succinct about what is the most impactful action that your organisation is taking for yourselves or to encourage others. Caroline.
Okay, well, my own organisation with the energy policy team, which is the piece I'm in, will be continuing to work and look at net zero and things like consumer protections. My own particular subset of it is in the energy networks and systems role. So in the next number of months, I'm going to be continuing to lobby and advocate and examine and put pressure on both the networks and Ofgem, the regulator, to try and get the best value for money services from the DNOs in their next set of business planning for the next price control. So that's my total focus, is to represent consumers on that to get the best we can so that they do the services needed to help people get to net zero, but it doesn't cost us more than it should.
Thanks, Caroline. Mo.
So my contribution, hopefully it'll be a global contribution, is two innovations that we're working on. They are both streetlight innovations. I can't say much about it right now because they're still in the development stage, but the impact is absolutely phenomenal in terms of demand on the grid. So hopefully on the innovation side of things, my little contribution will have a much bigger impact.
Thanks, Mo. Chris?
Yeah, I think the FSB's actually been thrown quite a good roll of the dice over the past year. It's a business support network, and because of all the issues that we've had to deal with, we've actually seen our membership grow. And our main core team, based both in Blackpool and London, have worked incredibly hard to get everything that we do very much online. That's from networking to all the support and everything. What's happened is that's allowed a real transformation to take place. So where we had networking that was maybe Manchester specific before now anybody from around the country can attend. And so we can cover a lot more issues, we can get a lot more feedback, a lot more support across the country, and people don't need to drive to networking meetings. So the time element has been cut right down. You can dip in and out as you want. You can pick out the information that you want. And really, in terms of a green impact, it's been phenomenal. My mileage has tumbled, as has everybody's. But I think going forward, everybody's become very, very comfortable with this kind of meeting. It might not be ideal for everything, but it's a very, very good tool to use. And I think that the way that the FSB's adopted it, it's certainly cut its carbon footprint massively. And it's very much a part of our remit going forward as to how the organisation will operate.
Thanks, Chris. And finally, by no means least though, Vic.
That's fine, Elise, although I'm not going to be very original because it's the biggest effect it's had on most organisations over the last year is to move to home working. And simply, we're utilising digital platforms like this, which means we're no longer on the road or using public transport to, attend these events in person or attending workplace meetings or whatever they may be. So we're cutting our carbon footprint simply that way. So it's had a huge effect on us. There's been a massive change in terms of adapting to those ways of working. Some of them good, some of them bad, but clearly it's going to have a good impact on the climate in the long run.
Thanks, Vic, and thank you to Dr. Helen Rogers for that question, which I snuck in, and I'd imagine the people organising this meeting are like, oh, hurry up, Elise. So without further ado, we need to move to our first polling question. Paul, did you want to take us maybe into that first polling question? But before we just do that, honestly, thank you so much to the panelists for a really interesting conversation on what our challenges are, well, some of our challenges, because let's face it, we have an ambitious target to get to, but some of the challenges that we're facing here in Greater Manchester. Paul.
Thanks, Elise. That's great. Yeah, my thanks to the panelists as well. Really good and lots of really important things to hear there. In terms of Electricity North West's response to your final question, two things that we're doing. In the short term, we're going to really continue to demonstrate the exemplar sites that we've built in the last year. So we have a zero carbon training academy, a zero carbon depot. We're building a zero carbon substation. We need to promote those and show them to others so that they can learn from the lessons that we've endured in getting those sites to net zero, and share that further so that other people can take those lessons on board themselves. And in the longer term, my challenge is to build a business plan that I submit to our regulator this year that does take us forward to net zero, continues to help us to lead the way there, and responds directly to all of Caroline's challenges, which are very welcome and very constructive. So we'll be doing that. But let's move quickly on to our first poll. So the question here is just what should Electricity North West's focus be in helping with the green recovery? So we're really interested in people ticking one of these options and clicking submit at the bottom. But also, if you've got any further comments that you want to make on this role, please put them in the chat. And when you put them in the chat, if you can put them to all panelists and attendees, then everybody can see them. So click the button and press submit now. So just waiting to see how we got going. Oh, quite a lot of responses coming in. Oh, that's great. So it looks like most people have already responded. So can we see the quick result on the screen? Here we go. So a very overwhelming majority for focusing on a balance between investment in net zero and protecting customers in vulnerable situations. So that's the sort of response I would have expected, and it's pleasing to see. Interesting that there is a little bit of emphasis on focus more on net zero. A lot of discussion I've had around with people on that is that people recognise that net zero will ultimately provide a protection for everybody in society and is really important. But that balance point's coming out very strongly there. So thank you everybody for that. Back to Elise and we'll carry on with the debate.
Yeah, really interesting poll that, isn't it? Yes, thank you. And thank you very much to our first panelists again for joining us this morning. But now we come to panel number 2 and the opportunities that powering up Greater Manchester. So we're here and we're joined today, and I'd like to give a really warm welcome to Andrew Gwynne MP for Denton and Reddish, Emma Degg, the CEO of Northwest, is it Business Leadership Team, I think that an acronym stands for, and Cllr Ennis, CEO of Siemens UK and Ireland and chairman of Net Zero Northwest. So thank you very much. Those of you who have hawk eyes will have noticed that Lou Cardwell is not with us, unfortunately, this morning. She's had an emergency that she's had to go and participate in. So without further ado, however, we will crack on because we still have a really great panel to talk with us today. The first question to the panel is, as the net zero transition accelerates, what are the opportunities to reboot the economy and create green jobs and skills for Greater Manchester? So I will come in order of introductions. I'll take Andrew first and then Emma, and then I'll come to Carl. Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Elise, and I'd like to thank Electricity North West for inviting me to speak today. I think we've had a fascinating discussion so far, and the issue of how we can secure a recovery from the pandemic that is both green and fair is probably one of the most pressing that we face as a city region and as a nation. So events like this are really invaluable. What we do know is that the world of work has been massively disrupted by the pandemic, and trends that were already there slowly moving behind the scenes before the pandemic have accelerated massively as a consequence of it. And whether things ever go back to normal, I'm not so sure. I think the challenge for us in the immediate future is how we try to avoid or mitigate a period of higher unemployment. What we do know is that some jobs will have disappeared over the past year and they aren't coming back, and that a whole generation have had their education and training disrupted. So therefore we have a future workforce that is ready and waiting for the opportunity to learn new skills, to take on new green jobs. However, it can be really easy to talk about these green jobs and skills in the abstract. We can all agree till we're blue in the face that this is what needs to happen and it's a good thing, but actually putting it into practice is obviously going to be much harder. Now, I'm ever the optimist, and on the upside, Manchester has always been a world leader. It was at the forefront of the first industrial revolution. We were the centre of Cottonopolis, the home of the world's first passenger railway station. It's the place where Mr. Rolls met Mr. Royce, the home of cooperation, where the atom was first split, where the world's first programmable computer was developed, and of course, more recently, graphene too. We are a centre of excellence, of innovation, and we are always at the forefront of ambition. But how do we ensure that Greater Manchester leads the next green industrial revolution? And that means taking a punt on future jobs. What are they going to be? And, you know, some of it is a little bit of licking your finger and sticking it in the wind to see which way it blows. We need to take a gamble. We need to look long term. But there are also some fundamentals. How do we make Greater Manchester an attractive place to invest, to come and set up a business? How do we ensure that we are world competitive in terms of transport, of connectivity, not just within the city region, but across the country and internationally as well? And most importantly, how do we match the skills development to marry the timeline for bringing new jobs and investment? Because it's a bit of the chicken and the egg syndrome. You need to have the right skills to bring the right companies to locate in Greater Manchester. And that is where I go back to taking a punt on what are the future jobs and how do we train the next generation of Greater Mancunians up to be able to meet the needs of tomorrow. And of course, there is a huge role for government and local government here, and the work of the combined authority is setting the train in motion on a load of these agendas. But there's also a massive role for business, and there is an inherent tension in that business obviously has one eye on the markets of today and the needs of consumers today, but they also need to have another eye on the needs of tomorrow, on that process of diversification, and on the long-term investment in both infrastructure, equipment, and in skills to be able to meet the needs of tomorrow. Now, what I think is clear is that it will need a lot of collaborative working across sectors with support from local, regional, and national government, and it will require investment, and not just in the business infrastructure and the industrial infrastructure, but also in the transport and skills infrastructure. I'll end on this because I always like to say it, but the real challenge is, if there are new green jobs and they are located at a cluster, whether that's around the airport, around the city centre, around Salford Quays Media City, or around the northern part of Greater Manchester, Rochdale, Bury, Bolton, the challenge is, how do you get kids in my constituency in Denton and Reddish skilled up so they've got a chance of getting those new jobs? And then most importantly of all, how do you get them physically across the city region by public transport, preferably, so that they can access those jobs? And that is a huge challenge on investment, on infrastructure and on skills. But I believe, as I say, I'm ever the optimist that Greater Manchester can be at the forefront of this, and we can make our city region the best, the greenest, and the most successful in which to operate a business, to work, to live and to study.
Thanks, Andrew. Couldn't agree more. Creative bunch, aren't we, in GM? I will bring in Emma next. Emma.
Thanks very much, Elise. And I promise I'm not going to talk about squirrels, but it's something that might come up as a bit of a theme, I think, this morning. Quite agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far this morning, but I think there's something really important in the question, and that's the word about opportunity. And also I come at this from a Northwest point of view, right? So the Northwest Business Leadership Team is a group of cross-sector managing directors, CEOs and university vice-chancellors. And we're really interested in scale and making sure that we grasp opportunity and connect that in with need. So I just want to start off by reminding everybody how important the Northwest is to the country. So our manufacturing sector is worth £28 billion. It accounts for £1 in every 6 of the English total. And we generate £27 billion of exports. We've got 9,000 firms that export to markets outside the EU. And I think it's really important at the moment to remember about that weight, because when we're arguing for investment, whether that's from the private sector or from government, it's really important that that's in the context of what we can do for the whole of the country, really. And business, you know, is moving at the moment for all sorts of different reasons. Partly because I think the tectonic plates are moving, right? So BlackRock's latest statement, which is that they're going to be looking before they invest in companies at what their real track record is and what the measurements of that are, is real. So if businesses don't move on this, investors potentially will do so as well, because it makes sound economic sense to this. It's not just about, as important as that is, getting to net zero, it's about making sure that we continue to innovate and evolve. But as Vic said earlier, all of the warm words in the world won't make this happen, because it's like knitting spaghetti, right? Putting together opportunities with a pathway for the young people in Andrew's constituency, for those workers who are furloughed at the moment or whose jobs are at risk, is really complicated. It is like knitting spaghetti, and we are getting more and more fragmented at the moment. So the role for business, working with trade unions, working across with the public sector, is sticking to a long-term plan so we can start putting some of those things together. I'm not going to preempt what some of the things that Carl, I'm sure, is going to say, but he and the group of businesses that he's working with are providing real leadership in this space. This is an open door, but I don't think we're going to get this knitting happening nationally. We're going to have to do it in place, and we're going to have to do it at scale. And we need energy policy to be seen at the heart of innovation policy and at the heart of COVID recovery. And at the moment, the only place that's going to happen is if we get together in place and do what GM has always done, and actually what the Northwest has always been really good at doing, to make sure that we make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Squirrels and knitting spaghetti. Now, Carl, that's a lot to follow. But over to you.
I'm worried to ask about squirrels. I must have missed that note, but anyway, yes, and thank you for the opportunity. Yes, my name's Carl Ennis. I'm the CEO of Siemens in UK and Ireland, and I also am the chair of a group of businesses in the Northwest who are focused on decarbonising industry. And actually, I would say the same to, Emma mentioned, a lot of what's been said has already been said before. My opening statement was about the power of the Northwest, but Andrew's so eloquently stated that if I'd have had a Manchester scarf, I'd have been shaking it above my head. So, but it is true that we are an innovative bunch. And we have been at the centre of a lot of revolutions, industrial revolutions, and we are well placed to be at the centre of the fourth industrial revolution. I think one thing I would just, listening to the conversation, I think we all now appreciate, and perhaps we haven't always done so, that net zero is an imperative. But I still don't think that the scale of the task is properly grasped by everybody. And so a couple of previous comments were about, staying at home. Here's an interesting fact. In the height of the the first lockdown, where we almost crucified the economy, the carbon reduction in the UK, CO2 emission reduction was 17%. In some of our biggest cities, it was only 25%. So that just sort of, you can nearly kill the economy. And that was the sort of reduction we had. It got us back to the same emissions we had in 2006. So I think we should not underestimate the scale of this task. And I'm always have a little wry smile when we talk about the aspirations of cities to get to net zero, and the faster the better. I will be hugely impressed for those who make it by 2050, because it's a much bigger task than I think we probably have assessed. I think we do have a great opportunity now to reboot the economy. I think the government is keen to spend money. It knows it needs to do that, but I think we're at an important inflection point where we need to make sure we do what's right and not what is easy. And it's our jobs and to hold businesses and governments to account to make sure that we seize the opportunity to build back green and build back local. I think there are some good indicators to say that that's going to happen. We've talked about the National Investment Bank being based in Leeds and with a clear mandate on place-based innovation and infrastructure and green infrastructure, and also the recently announced industrial decarbonisation strategy is really important. And actually, to answer the question, Elise, that you asked of the others, Siemens, we've been on our journey of net carbon zero since 2014. We set a target to get there by 2030, and we're actually 50% of the way there. So, but actually recently we've realised that it's not enough, and so only a few weeks ago we globally signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, which holds us accountable, externally accountable and independently auditable to actions that we believe will need to happen to get us to a 1.5 degrees C increase. So there's some really big actions going on out there. A lot of talk has been around big. How do we get to net carbon zero and doing big stuff because it's really sexy and government can concentrate on it. But actually, if you only do the big stuff, you won't get to net carbon zero. So it's just doing we've done some really good stuff happened over the last 10 years, particularly in the energy space, getting coal off the bars, wind power, hydrogen economy. We talk about all those things. Those have to happen, but there's also a lot of local things that need to happen. So it's not just the national activities, but local activities in energy, heat and transport, and also domestic and industrial. And there's been discussion about retrofitting on domestic. If I just briefly talk about industrial, Emma mentioned it. I'm the chair of Net Zero Northwest, and we're a group of businesses in the northwest of England who and we're committed to positioning the northwest of England to be the first net zero low carbon industrial cluster by 2030 and net zero by 2040. And we're doing it by delivering infrastructure in the region. And we've estimated that our infrastructure opportunities that the groups have identified, whether it be HyNet or Protos or the smart grid opportunity in the Cheshire Energy Hub, and what Cadent are doing, that actually we can attract investment, and this is private investment. So we've estimated that if we do that, we can invest in the next 10 years £4 billion worth of investment and create new jobs, 30,000 jobs. I actually think that's a low number, and I think the opportunity is great. So yes, there is a challenge, but there is an opportunity to balance that challenge. And I will finally say it by about how do we generate those jobs. And I think Chris from FSB hit on the nail. We need a plan, but it needs to be long-term and it needs to be stable. And I think that's where national government come in. It's their job to help put that long-term plan out there and help prime the pump with development. But then there's also an obligation of cities and local regions. Sometimes cities and local regions are not easy to deal with from a commercial perspective. So I think we also need to work out how do we take some of the bureaucracy out of the system to allow us to be able to do some of the things that needs to be done at local level to the benefit of local people and local jobs and opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. So we've had some really good questions and thoughts put in the chat already. I kind of just want to pick up on a couple of things. With Lou not being here, I feel a little obliged to step in slightly as Vice Chair of the LEP and of the Greater Manchester LEP and as the portfolio lead for the GMCA around building on that certainty and having a plan. So the local industrial strategy, Greater Manchester's local industrial strategy, really worked out what was our frontier sectors, knowing that we had to think about where were the jobs going to be in the future, and clean green growth was one of those future facing sectors where we are pushing with all we can into that space, and building on that. What are the opportunities then? How are they? What are these solutions and creative minds that we have in Greater Manchester coming up with to see how we can tackle some of those challenges that we outlined earlier? And I'd just say two things. One is a really new piece of work that's recently been that we're recently talking about with the LEP around Innovation Greater Manchester, and it's building on a lot of the mature structures that we've got in Greater Manchester, the universities and some of all of that great stuff that we heard Andrew speak about, that we know we can create that. And as it was pointed out in the chat, I think by Alan Quinn, is how do we take those ideas like graphene and see the value delivered in Greater Manchester and not disappear off somewhere else. And Innovation GM is about how we do that, how we work with universities on new ideas and see that innovation deliver value in Greater Manchester, so we get products that are brought to market locally, manufactured locally, much of what Mo was talking about, I think, earlier in the other panel. And then the other element I just want to touch on is how we tackle planning. And I'm going to talk about Stockport because it's what I know best, but the Mayoral Development Corporation in Stockport is seeking to regenerate an entire brownfield urban town centre area. So our town centres, high streets, we know what that's been like recently and how we are completely looking to regenerate this area, but doing it what the tagline's coolest, newest, coolest, greenest, and so actually embedding ensuring that when we're retrofitting, we're not retrofitting, we're regenerating, reinvesting in an area and doing it with greenest, for want of a better term, as a golden thread that runs through every element of what we're looking to achieve. And I'm saying that about Stockport. There are other ideas, you know, being worked on across Greater Manchester, but I think it's about when we're seeking to do these big changes, how we're going to do that. So I am going to shut up now and bring in a comment. I'm going to ask you about retrofit accelerators. So Todd Holden has asked a question about upgrading people's homes and enabling them to adopt low carbon technologies, and the opportunities maybe to develop a retrofit accelerator. What would be a retrofit accelerator? Well, how would you view that, and what do you think of that idea, basically? So I might start with Carl and go backwards, if that's all right. Carl.
That's thanks for that. I think Elise, it's not an easy one, and as a big industrial organisation, I would say a retrofit of domestic properties isn't necessarily our sort of strength, but I will pick up on some of the conversations that were said before. I think the skills you require to do retrofit and are the same skills that you need to build from new. They're just perhaps applied in a slightly different manner, and you need perhaps slightly different experience. So I think the core skills are reasonably well understood. I think for me on the skills topic, one of the things that often gets missed, and I'm often asked by our HR head when I talk about this, they say, well, what skills do you want? And as many people have said, it's exceedingly difficult to work out what skills you need in the future. One thing you know that we're going to need, though, that we're not very good at is flexibility. So we need people to recognise. I'm lucky, one of the other comments in the chat, by the way, is that engineering companies should be run by engineers. I'm pleased to say I'm an engineer, thank the Lord for that. And I'm actually a time-served apprentice, so I served my time as an apprentice a very long time ago. You know, these skills are really, really important to have. But I started, and I've been working for coming up for 40 years, and yes, I know I don't look old enough, but you know, nowadays it won't be the case that people start and have those long journeys. They will have to be prepared to flex through time. So somebody starts in one skill and pivots to another, and I think that flexibility will be really, really important, because nobody knows what the answer is, and it's almost certain we're going to set off down some tracks and then have to backtrack a little bit and go down another as this whole thing develops.
I couldn't get myself off mute then. Thanks, Carl. I'll bring Emma in next, and then I'll come to Andrew. Emma.
Thank you. Should say, first of all, I would have Todd Holden in charge, who's asked the question of all of this policy for the whole of the Northwest. But so I'm not going to give an answer to somebody who I know knows it better than me. What I would say is, with retrofit, like so much else, we know how to do individual properties, right? What we don't know is how to do it at scale, and how to fund it, and how to have real proper attention on it. So I would absolutely endorse the potential for an accelerator. I would say there's a real social justice issue in all of this. If we don't sort out how we're going to fund this and how we're going to scale, because it is the poorest and those most at risk from fuel poverty who will be less able to actually find the capital to do that themselves and to take advantage of some of the grant stuff around at the moment. So for me, it's the #1 priority, retrofit, actually, and we just need to get our heads together and sort it out. Just wanted to say something actually in response to something that Carl just said about and the chat about engineers running engineering companies. And while I think it's absolutely right, we need to continue having a focus on STEM and getting particularly actually women and Black and Asian minority ethnic communities interested in and involved in engineering and science and so on. I think there's a danger in presuming that there isn't a role for the humanities as well. One of our members is a brilliant company called Excite Hargreaves that's based in GM. It's heavy engineering. They recruit a lot of people every year. They've started as a result of COVID actually with some of the skill shortages that have been opening up, recruiting art students. And they've actually found that not only have those graduates really grasped the opportunity, but they've brought something really interesting to the business as well, in terms of that cognitive diversity and some of the flexibility Carl was talking about. So I think it's really important that we all understand about the importance of that whole person, really, and that flexibility of what we need through education, and not actually to write anybody off for green jobs, regardless of the route that they've taken so far. If we can really look at the retraining and in-work training as well. So, thanks, Elise.
No, the lifelong learning, that's the thing, isn't it? And the way things are changing, we need to be able to ensure that people can move, and Innovation GM together, it's like a parallel. So we're not only looking at building on the maturity that we have, so I know it's been mentioned, the Energy House in Salford, so the universities, all the universities, including Bolton, and how we take those ideas in a way that allows it to be the value to be delivered in Greater Manchester, but how we also link up our universities with our FHEs and our HE colleges, how our learning establishments, business schools, etc., and how we make sure that people are able to pivot into new jobs, develop their skills at all the levels. Because businesses need people at level 3, level 4, as well as PhDs, and it's how do we get all of that together. So I'm really, really excited about Innovation GM as a real help and a boost to this agenda, but all of them, the whole of the frontier sectors, and what the future is gonna hold. Andrew, I'd like to bring you in. Final comment, please.
Yeah, I mean, Todd raises a really important point. Emma talked about retrofitting at scale, and that was something that I was going to mention as well, because there is a huge challenge there. We know how to do these things, but of course it is how we do them at the kind of scale that we're talking about. There is a massive opportunity here though for jobs growth, because if we are really serious about doing these things, then we need to have the workforce that's able to do it at the scale that we need them to do. But it's not just about retrofitting properties, it's also about how we start to develop Greater Manchester into a smart city. I've been very fortunate to go to some parts of the world where they are a million miles ahead of us in terms of smart city technology. It's frightening, but really exciting as well to see how they are developing. So, you know, literally there are cities in China that they have air quality monitoring equipment on every lamppost, and the moment that a street exceeds the safe air quality limits, the electronic road signs, the LED road signs that are on the same lampposts, change direction to divert the cars away from the street that's exceeding safe air quality standards. That's just one example of using smart technology in the infrastructure of a large conurbation, a big city. You know, things like that are exciting. Every lamppost also has an electric charging point for vehicles. The road sign LED signs can be advertising boardings as well, and this is where it gets really freaky, Elise, because the cameras spot what you're wearing, they make an assessment of where you bought your suit or your shirt, and all the advertising boards then match your own profile for the kind of products that you're wearing and might buy, which I think is a bit big brother, and particularly in a country like China where this can be used for bad as well as good. It's a little bit scary, but these cities are using this technology to enhance the environment, to enhance safety, and their workforce is developing the skills in IT, in manufacturing, in development of smart city technology. We need to get Greater Manchester plugged into this as well.
Couldn't agree with you more, Andrew. And I think it is frightening, and the role of therefore trust, security and cyber with that becomes more and more important, as well as the ethics, which I think is what you were touching on as well. Advanced materials, graphene, innovation, health innovation, and everything that is the digital, which kind of much like what we're here to talk about today, about a green recovery, is another golden thread that's going to run through everything, isn't it, at the end of the day? I really think we've had another really great panel with some really good discussion. I'd like to thank you all. We're going to move to our second polling question, I think. I really want to thank you all again for taking the time to be part of today's discussion. Paul, what's the next question?
Okay, thanks, Elise, and thanks to all the panel again. That's brilliant. So the next question is, building on our previous question about our role, we want to dig into that in a little bit more detail. So here, rather than submitting one answer, you can pick as many as you like. So it's not a multiple choice out of, it's a choose as many multiples as you like kind of question. So what should our role beyond infrastructure be? Is it about educating and advising domestic customers about net zero, about educating and advising business customers, supporting customers in vulnerable circumstances, initiatives to tackle fuel poverty? Or do you disagree? Do you think that we should focus on the infrastructure alone? Or is it something else? And if it's something else, we'd love to hear from people. Please put something in the chat on that. You can tick all of those or just one or two and click submit, and we'll see what people come up with. Thanks very much. So I'm just looking for my stats on how we're doing so far. Quite a few people have already submitted a response, a few more to come in. Okay, we're getting there now. last few, and if we could put the results up on the screen, please. Here we go. Okay, so the most popular answer by far is educating and advising domestic customers about net zero. So that will be a big challenge for Electricity North West, but something that I think we can rise to. Closely followed by educating and advising business customers. And I would just draw people's attentions to the Go Net Zero hub on the Electricity North West website, which already contains a lot of great information for business customers in particular, but also information for domestic customers. But I'm sure there's more that we can do in that space. And then we've got big support for supporting customers in vulnerable circumstances and initiatives to tackle fuel poverty. So that's really, really good. Great set of responses. Thank you very much. And also a little bit of a counter, a small number of votes saying no, just focus on the infrastructure. So a range of views, which is always welcome. And if there are any other thoughts for people, then we are keen to see them in the chat as well. So that was great. Thank you very much. And I think, Elise, I'll hand back to you, but we'll have some closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. What a great morning, and what I feel is daunted and positive at the same time, if you can be both of those things. The scale of the challenge, and I think it's been articulated, is huge, isn't it? Even for 2050, never mind 2038. And I think there is a responsibility on everybody, even individuals at home up to the biggest organisations, including the government directly, to be all pulling in the same direction. And what we've seen this morning, I think, is a collective ambition to do just that, from a various bunch of very different but equally enthused organisations that have identified this as a main issue, that want to be part of what the solution's going to offer, and want to ensure that it is for the benefit of the planet, but it is for the benefit of the people as well. And I think that's come out strong for me this morning. We know that there are lots of challenges. I think we've discussed them quite significantly, but I'd say we seem to be optimistic as well. There are ideas for the future on what we're going to do and what we could be doing, even if we're not sure that it's going to be enough. At least we're taking the steps in that direction, and the idea to have a plan, have a long-term plan, have a plan that gives us some certainty and is ambitious and does push us, but have a plan that we reflect on regularly, that we test to make sure that it's still the right plan, that it's still what we want to do as we're going forward, and that Greater Manchester is in a really good spot. We have a lot to offer. I'm very excited about Innovation GM and what the potential is for that, not just about investment into Greater Manchester, but also and the creating of jobs and businesses growing and being successful in Greater Manchester, but also the skills and what a transformational change that can make to the skills offering, to ensuring people have the right skills. And then how we look at things like the Mayoral Development Corporation and take our planning policies and making sure that when we're making changes and regenerating our areas and changing our areas, that we're doing that for the benefit of our planet and our people. And so I'm daunted, but I'm positive, Paul, about this. I really want to thank everybody for all the time that they've taken to be part of this today. We are going to be finishing a little early so that we can all participate in remembering those we've lost, but and the year that we've been through. But I would like to thank you, Energy Northwest, to Electricity Northwest, to invite me back. Despite what I did last time. So thank you so much, Paul. And I don't know if you remember, but last time I referred to us as the Chuckle Brothers, and I sincerely apologise for any offence I might have caused in doing that. But in true Chuckle Brothers style, to you, Paul.
All right, to me. Okay, no, that's great. Definitely no offence being referred to as the Chuckle Brother. They're my childhood heroes. Brilliant, guys. So final sort of closing comments from me. It just a lot of food for thought, actually, for us as a company in some of the things that have been raised by a number of our wonderful panelists and speakers today. So we do recognise that it's an enormous challenge. We recognise that Electricity North West have a special and unique role to play. We can't do everything on our own, but we do share in the ambition and in the hope that has been expressed today for this region, for what we can do to move forward to achieve a net zero status and support and improve our environment. And in doing that, what we can do to support and give hope to people recovering from the devastating effects of the pandemic and the economic downturn, and hope that this recovery can be green. Electricity North West is committed to this region, to Greater Manchester and to the rest of the northwest of England. We will continue to be investing heavily in this region. We anticipate bringing even more investment into the region as we go forward with our business plan, and making sure that we follow up on our commitments, that all the infrastructure that the region needs from an electricity perspective to achieve net zero is always provided, and that infrastructure is in place in time, that it's never a barrier to anybody to adopt the low carbon technologies that we need to achieve net zero, and that we're always there in advance so people can rely on the infrastructure and then do their things to get to a net zero status. So that's the commitment that we're looking to make in regard to this, and really excited about forming a business plan that meets the aspirations of all the communities that we serve, and looks after everybody involved in the whole community as well. So thank you very much. My final job is to just thank you, Elise, for doing a brilliant job. Thank you for not only chairing us very elegantly all the way to the end, but also stepping in with the comments from the LEP's perspective as well. So brilliant to have all of your contributions, as well as to thank everybody from all of our panels for their great contributions today. And with that, I think we'll close a couple of minutes early and allow everybody to get themselves a cup of tea at the same time as getting ready for the minute's silence and moving on to their next Zoom call. I'm sure that everybody else is spending the rest of the day on. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.